Peace. What's good? How y'all doing? Welcome to another edition of 60 Days of History with ZaZa Ali. Today is day 7, and we are going to be focusing on Queen Judith and the Falasha Jews. The image you see at the left-hand side of your screen is an Ethiopian fresco. It is either a drawing of Queen Judith, who we're going to be referencing today, or Makeda, the Queen of Sheba, who we discussed early on in chapter 3, which this passage is from chapter 3 of Ancient People, a Social Studies and History textbook. The Falasha Queen Judith is considered a most unusual figure in Ethiopian history. Unfortunately, the details of her life and history are exceedingly incomplete, but she is of interest to us because she was a bona fide female conqueror. Other noted female military leaders in African history, like Amenarhanes, who we cover earlier on in this chapter, and Nzinga, were both defenders of their respective countries against invaders. But Judith appears to have actually started the war against the Axumite or Abyssinian Solomonic dynasty, carried it to a successful conclusion, and then reigned for 40 years unchallenged. The Solomonids remained out of power for some 300 years thereafter because after Judith came the dynasty of the Zagwe around 1000 CE, who may have been ethnically related to Judith. Indeed, there is debate about Judith's ethnic origins or even whether her name was Judith or Gudit, spelled Gudit. Though some describe her as a pagan, it is generally accepted that she was of the Jewish religion either by birth or by conversion. It is stated that she was of a Gal origin, who were said to be a branch of the Falasha Jews. What is universally agreed upon is that she was an enemy of Christianity and the Solomonid kings of Axum. She proceeded to conquer Axum, seize the throne, and then systematically lay waste to all of the Christian churches, almost said pagan churches, the Christian churches, killing thousands of Christians in the process. In the history of the patriarchs of Alexandria, mention is made of a letter from the Axumite king who pleaded with the patriarch of Alexandria to send help against an unnamed warrior queen who was laying waste to Axum. No help was forthcoming because Judith succeeded in conquering all of Axum, thus bringing close to a 2,000-year dynasty. This is about all we know of her. The official Ethiopian chronicles, for the most part, pass over her reign in silence. What is remembered is her reported cruelties and venom towards Christians. There are still some Ethiopian historical manuscripts that have not been released to the world. If they ever are, perhaps we will learn more about this astonishing warrior queen. The Falasha Queen Judith represents a special case. She was considered by the Solomonids of Abyssinia to be a usurper because she conquered and ruled over Abyssinia for 40 years. However, the official Ethiopian chronicles virtually ignore her, and much of what we know about her comes from pieces of non-Ethiopian literature. She must have been a remarkable woman, one with unusual ability as a political and military leader. By the 9th and 10th centuries BCE, Freudian slip, Hebrew communities had thrived for centuries had thrived for many centuries and were widespread in Africa. It was a considerate network of traders and craftsmen. Various rulers sought to use this network to further their interests. King David and King Solomon allegedly sought to utilize this network of different communities to further the trading interests of the Israelite state. Often, in joint venture with the Canaanites, trade contracts were opened or consolidated in Africa through the mediation of some of those old African Hebrew communities. In addition to the older civilizations, many relatively recent Israelite immigrants settled in communities found throughout Egypt, Ethiopia, Sudan, Somalia, Eritrea, Kenya, Tanzania, Mozambique, and Southern Africa. These settlements were occasionally increased with a new influx of migrant refugees from the so-called Holy Land, driven by insecurity, famine, and regional conflicts. Following the conquest of Israel in the 8th century BCE by the Assyrians, and the 6th century destruction of Jerusalem by the Babylonians, even more Jewish refugees fled into their older communities in Africa. By this time, Black kingdoms in and around Africa were overflowing with migrant Jews. Kingdoms like Yemen, Ethiopia, and the North African Punic kingdoms up to Mauritania had substantial Jewish settlements. Original Hebrew tribes and historical Jewish communities have existed in Africa for at least 5,000 years. Known as Falasha, or strangers, Ethiopian Jews lived in isolation for centuries, practicing an ancient pre Talmudic form of Jerusalem. That's an important point, which, according to tradition, traces its origins back to Solomon and Makeda. In the 17th century, this prosperous civilization was overpowered by neighboring tribes. Years of persecution and discrimination followed. With Israel coming under Greek, Persian, and later Roman rule and dependency, renewed waves of Jewish refugees, including traders and artisans, began to set up more communities in Egypt, Nubia, and the Punic Empire, notably in Carthage. From Carthage, they began to scatter into various historically established as well as newly emerging Jewish communities south of the Atlas Mountains, nearer to the modern day city of Mauritania, Niger, Mali, Nigeria, Senegal, Cameroon, and the Congo. Jewish nomadic groups also moved across the Sahara from Nubia and the ancient kingdom of Kush towards Africa. Various East and West African ethnic nations lay verifiable claim to their Jewish ancestral heritage. The Falashas, the most famous of those Black Jews, have been validated. Close to 300,000 of these Black Falasha Jews, live in the modern state of Israel as practicing Jews. Thank you guys again. I was almost about to go to a sermon about what's happening in modern day Israel, but we're going to keep this focused on ancient people because we know that I can go into a whole nother frequency and situation, but we're not going to do that. Ancient People is a social studies and history textbook by ZaZa Ali, a full color 349 page historical expose focused on ancient civilizations around the world. Available in paperback and hardcover, this book places emphasis on vocabulary, spelling, critical thinking, and more. There are more than 450 photos included in the book as well. Topics discussed are Hawaii's last monarchy, the Moors in Spain, the Kandakis of Ethiopia and Kush, the African presence in Asia, and Pharaoh Hatshepsut and the 18th dynasty. You can get more information by clicking the link in the description or going to my website, zazaali.com. Peace and love.